This is Dr. Phil and Jordan Peterson. These two people are pretty well known on the Twitch and other social media platforms. They're also both right-wing nutcases. So they had a conversation with each other not too long ago, and it went completely off the rails. I feel like it was like hard to wade through anything that they said because they were just cramming nonsensical garbage next to each other and just calling it a day. Like nothing that they said made any sense. Anyway, some of Dr. Phil's stuff was psychologically sound and interesting. So I want to listen to what they have to say. And while we do, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild 2. Tears of the Kingdom should just be in the background. Won't bother you too much while we listen.
Desert.
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason people need a coherent belief system, because
what does he mean by that exactly?
Otherwise they're incoherent, right? And so what happens, I think this is also why power and hedonism have become focuses of identity.
Because people don't have cohesive belief systems?
Is when the higher forms of identity collapse, then people default towards narratives of power. That's what.
And what are the higher forms of identity? What do you mean by that, Jordan? Higher forms of identity? Like what?
The Marxists do, right? Or this meta-Marxism we have now is every single dimension of potential comparison between people devolves into explanation of power, right? Is that all there's an infinite number of dimensions of oppression. And it's an interesting explanation because...
Dude, I am so lost. What the hell is this guy talking about?
When systems deteriorate, they do deteriorate in the direction of power and oppression. So there's almost no system that you can point to that can't be explained in part with a power narrative. And alternatively, you can have a narrative of instantaneous gratification, something like that.
I don't know what he means by this or what point he was trying to get to by saying it, but okay, go on.
And it's better to replace that with, well, that's what we're struggling with in this conversation, right? Is that you want to replace those narratives of power and gratification with a higher order narrative that offers more and explains more simultaneously.
You at least want to replace it with a social system where you're not in a situation where I would, and I'm not the first one to say this, and it's been said better than I can say it, but I would a lot rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. And
yes, okay, I agree.
And right now, we're in a situation too often where we have answers we can't question, because if you question an answer, you're labeled a hater. You're labeled some kind of phobe. You're labeled some kind of...
Look, the problem is that the answers that you've been given, you're more than free to ask those questions and do research and try to understand the answers and honestly ask people who are, ask somebody of the LGBT community, what does this mean? Why do they feel this way or that way? That's not the problem. Honestly, finding answers to these questions isn't the issue. Everyone's fine with answering questions, whatever questions you got. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you're not satisfied with the answers, okay, that's fine. It's not asking the questions that's the problem. The problem, to say, asking why being gay is allowed in society, for example, or how being gay evolved or whatever, is you're not asking the question for an answer. There is an underlying implication with the question. You're implying that it's wrong. Feel free to ask the question. Go nuts. Ask to your heart's content. It's a fascinating question. How did being gay evolve? I looked for the answer one time. I was curious. How does evolution jive with homosexuality? The answer? Throughout history, there have been times where the population that we're dealing with has had a surplus of orphans and a shortage of parents, but a surplus of parents who wanted children. Being gay was not filtered out because gay people served an evolutionary purpose. I had another question. Why are baby cats cuter than baby humans to us? You'd think that baby humans were the cutest thing on planet Earth. I still haven't really found an answer to that, but the point is, these questions are perfectly A-okay to ask. It's okay to ask them. The problem is asking them in an adversarial way in which the real point of asking the question is to denigrate and hate and tear somebody down, not looking for an answer, looking for a way to hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
Of heretic just by asking a question. God forbid you disagree, but I would
like disagreeing is okay too. Feel free, go nuts, disagree. None of this stuff is a problem. It's that you refuse facts when they're presented to you. And you know what? Okay, if you accept all of the facts and you still disagree, all right, that's fine. I get that. Some people just refuse to accept certain things. That makes you dumb as dog. It doesn't mean you're an asshole necessarily for denigrating the LGBT community. It just means you're too fucking stupid to understand the question in the first place, let alone the answer. That's all.
a lot rather have a whole set of questions we haven't found the answers for yet than have a whole set of answers I'm not permitted to even challenge.
You're allowed to challenge these questions. No one said you weren't. Who told you you weren't allowed to challenge these questions, Phil? Which person? Point the person out. Tell me where they touched you, where they hurt you.
Dig in on. And I think that's where we are when we're dealing with cults, when we're dealing with power mongers.
So imagine that it's easy to confuse a questioner with a deconstructionist.
Like, as if there aren't people out there right now, as we speak, research professors studying, writing professional studies that will be cited in the future, explaining why gay people evolved along with straight people, as if that, that isn't happening. The questions aren't the issue. You're allowed to ask anything you want.
So imagine that it's easy to confuse a questioner with a deconstructionist, right? So let's say I'm in a comfortable delusion and you come along and start asking questions. Now, my objection to you could be, you're doing nothing but poking holes. Now, you're making the claim, and I think this is actually a pointer to what the higher part of identification should be.
Poking holes is okay. There's nothing wrong with poking holes, in my opinion. You should be able to poke holes. If something is not, if something can have holes poked in it like that, then it's not structurally sound and should have those holes poked. Again, I reiterate, string theory is a perfect example. String theory is a hypothesis, not a theory. And holes should be poked in that. We should be poking holes in things if they don't really fully make sense to us.
No, is that, so for example, the ancient Egyptians worshiped the open eye, right? That's the eye of Horus. And their notion was that the force that renews everything is the eye that pays attention. And it's akin to the idea of questioning, right? The redemptive questioner questions to build. He doesn't question to destroy. But it's easy for people who are entrenched in a delusion to treat every questioner as if he's nothing but an agent of destruction. And,
No, I mean, questioners can build or destroy. I don't think it matters. Feel free. If something doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then it doesn't stand.
Oh, you mentioned something here, which is work hard to understand the way others see things. If you're a questioner and you're using your questioning to do nothing but destroy the other person's belief system, to elevate your moral stature, right? To show that you're smarter, to show that you have all the answers. That's like the sin of intellectual pride, I would say. It's easy to be viewed as a deconstructive agent. And then you can understand why people get defensive about their beliefs. So you need to question in the attempt to replace what's insufficient with something better, right? So you have to be a builder and a questioner. And it seems to me
You don't have to do anything you want. If you want to question something, then that's your absolute right to question it. I don't understand.
that conception of who you are, that's part and parcel of treating yourself and others with dignity and respect, or even being who you are on purpose, that means something like the recognition that you're a building questioner, right? Not a destroying questioner, and putting that at the center.
I think that requires you to do something that most people, I don't think, come to naturally, and that is we have to determine what other people's currency is, because we assume that people have the same currency as ourselves.
Like, I'm so goddamn fucking confused by what they're saying right now. What the hell are you guys going on about?
And that not only is not true, it's often not the case. For example, I think, and I work a lot with law enforcement, and
oh, don't tell me that.
I've done training with law enforcement
Oh, don't tell me that.
on interrogation techniques, how
Oh, no, please, no.
to do deception detection, things of that nature. And I always love talking to the negotiators about how to get where you want to get in a negotiation. And Chris Voss, who's probably the most experienced negotiator with the FBI, who's now retired, will tell you this very thing. He will tell you that your best shot of ever getting hostages out from a hostage
is to befriend the person and to show them that you're looking out for their best interests, and you try to, in a good faith way, give them what they want, and tell them that it was a struggle for them, right?
taker is if you can get that hostage taker to fully and completely believe that you understand why they took that hostage to begin
Yes, absolutely.
with, whether
Right,
it's
right.
whether it's
Yeah, again, Psych 10, not Psycho 10. This wasn't my first year in psychology classes. This wasn't until later.
a domestic violence situation or a political situation or whatever, if they understand that you get why they did what they did to begin with, so they feel heard, that a big part of their currency is, I want to be heard. I want to be understood here. I want people to understand and get why I felt driven to this desperate act.
Yeah, this is Psychology 101, and this is also part of street epistemology. If you guys ever heard of street epistemology, the idea is to communicate to people that you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and you're on board even with some of it. You know, you talking to a Trump supporter? Totally agree with a lot of stuff. I agree. There are problems in society. I am absolutely 100% with you on all of this stuff. Now, how do we fix it? What's the best way to fix it? Don't present facts. Facts are irrelevant, and it's going to cause the backfire effect. You want to give people a voice. You want them to be heard and understood. And if you meet them halfway, if you understand and hear them, they will understand and hear you. It's reciprocal. People want a reciprocal connection with somebody else. That's what they're looking for. Yeah, that absolutely. I didn't actually, it took me forever to get to this point. I think that I learned this outside of psych classes, as a matter of fact.
That if you can convince them that, hey, I get it. I'm not saying I agree with you, but I see through your eyes how the world looked and why you did what you did. Not saying I agree with it, not saying...
Don't even say not saying I agree with it. Just say, I get it. I understand. It makes sense. Totally. I get why you did what you did. Let's leave it at that. Say, these are innocent people, right? I'm hoping that, I just want to get these innocent people out, man. And whatever it takes, you want to get out of here, I get that. You want to get out of here, continue the fight, totally. Make sure you're on their side. That's what it's all about.
And you're going to get away with it. I'm just telling you, I understand how this looked from your point of view. And I mean, that's true all the way down to a teenager wanting to have a later curfew. They can assume, well, my mom and dad just want to control me, and they're saying he's just wanting to be more independent. And if you really listen, you can find out, wait a minute, they're being motivated by the currency of safety. They know that most of the accidents happen between when the bars let out and the next 2 hours. They want me off the street for safety purposes. And if they understand he wants to be with his friends when all the fun's happening right at the end of the evening, and they could negotiate where they both get what they want if they can just agree you're going to be at somebody's house verifiably hanging out during that time.
Yeah, negotiation is where everybody loses.
Then we can negotiate something in between. You're off the street, but I don't have to be home with mommy and daddy. So if they understand they each have a different currency, giving becomes much easier. But to do that, you've got to really listen and learn from somebody to know what's important to them.
Right.
Yeah, what Phil is saying here is accurate to the psychological research. This is correct, what he's saying. Jordan Peterson is not accurate to psychological research. He's not accurate to the English language, honestly.
Right. Well, you're pointing to something there that's a source of inestimable reward in relation.
A source of what reward? Did you just offend my mother? What is that a word? What was it he said? Let me step back. Listen again.
To something there that's a source of inestimable reward.
Inestimable with a C. That's not a word. He's just making words up. Inestimable is a word. You can't estimate something. Inestimable is not a word. What the hell are you saying, Jordan?
Reward in relationship to listening, because, a skeptic might say, well, for example, why should I listen to you if I can just force you to do what I want?
I'm a skeptic and I wouldn't say that. Why do you think I would say that?
And there's a couple of answers to that. I mean, the first answer is, well, you might be able to force the person now, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to force them tomorrow. And it certainly doesn't mean you're going to be able to force them once they come along with all their friends and tell you.
Yes, win hearts and minds.
To go to hell. And so solutions imposed by force tend to be unstable.
Yes.
So that's very much worth knowing. And, I've looked, I interviewed Chris Voss, by the way, but I also interviewed Frans de Waal about chimpanzees. And he's one of the world's foremost primatologists. And he's pointed out quite clearly that chimp alphas who use force have very short-term and violent reigns.
Okay, I don't know what research he's talking about, but to my knowledge, this whole idea of alpha, the alpha male, the alpha dog, the alpha whatever, is fake. The study was originally done on wolves, and somebody was convinced that there was an alpha wolf that ran the pack, wrote a whole book about it. Turns out what he was observing was actually just a parent taking care of the children, not an alpha, not like a controlling wolf or whatever. And he pulled his book from the shelves and tried to retract it and say, no, this is wrong, guys, please, no. But it was too late. It took root. Everybody started talking about all this alpha shit. I don't know what this alpha chimp thing is about. Is there an alpha chimp? Maybe, but I'm super skeptical.
And they reign over very fractured and destabilized chimp troops. So you can use force for a while, but it'll come back to haunt you. So then you might say, well, what's the alternative? And you laid that out to some degree with work hard to understand the way others see things. If I can understand what it is that you value And then I can negotiate with you a solution that enables you to move forward to what you value while I move forward simultaneously toward what I value. Then we've instantly created a relationship that will survive without supervision. Right? That's one of the things that's so cool about that is that
Do relationships need supervision? You know what? I shred these two guys, Dr. Phil and Jordan Peterson. I shred them. But I have to say, it's better than Andrew Tate, right? They don't seem to be like complete ass backwards narcissists who don't seem to care about anything or anybody but themselves. So I'll take it as a W. I think they are narcissists, but they don't show it. They say it in more veiled ways. Well, at the very least, Peterson does. Peterson says it in a veiled way. He views situations in a more veiled way, and he acts as more of a supporter for extremism and nutter buttery than an extremist himself. Like, he does everything he can to maintain systemic racism as a power structure, but he doesn't seem to be like outwardly, openly racist himself the way that Andrew Tate is, for example.
if you pay attention to someone and you understand what motivates them, and then that's built into your agreement, you don't have to be a tyrant and you don't have to micromanage, because you and the person will walk side by side without mutual supervision. Right? So Jean Piaget figured this out, by the way, when he was studying children. He figured this out technically. He said, imagine you put two systems in head-to-head competition with one another. One system was like an aristocratic tyranny, top-down, using force, and another system was bottom-up, using voluntary agreement. The system based on voluntary agreement will always outcompete the system based on force, because the system based on force will waste energy in enforcement.
Yeah, sure.
Well, and he was exactly right. And, Piaget also showed that actual learning that would be incorporated and saved was much better from the bottom up than from the top down, because people felt a degree of cooperation. And Piaget was right about that.
Right. Yeah, well, that's partly why, too, even in psychotherapy, part of the reason you don't give people advice as a psychotherapist is because if you haven't walked through the process of coming to the conclusion itself is rather weak. So if I deliver my client a ready, now and then, now and then you've got someone in your therapeutic practice and they're in a fix and how they could get out of it. You could just tell them. But if you tell them, first of all, they don't get to solve the problem. And you can take credit for that. You steal that from them. And second, they actually haven't gone through the effort necessary to generate the knowledge structure that will enable them to solve similar problems in the future. It's like you can control everything your child does and nothing bad will happen to them. But as soon as your child doesn't have you around, they're completely bereft. Maybe that was your goal all along. If you're like,
yeah, okay, I appreciate that. What's all this? Your goal all along? Having a bereft kid? What?
Like a devouring mother, for example. But I wonder how much of that is that associated. Are those ideas associated with your principles 7 and 8? Said actively live and support meritocracy and identify and build consequential knowledge. Is there a bridge to that? What would you say? That willingness to take it upon yourself to solve problems, and to deal with your own affairs?
Well, you're certainly right about the meritocracy. I believe this. We've made some really bad decisions, and I saw it happen.
Who's we?
With COVID, where the United States government spent $5.5 trillion in.
You mean Donald Trump? Donald Trump spent $5.5 trillion. Go on.
Giveaways during COVID.
They weren't giveaways. They were incentives to keep people from going outside and spreading it to other people. It wasn't like a mandate. You're not. It's not like you're not allowed to set foot outside. That wasn't the case. It was an incentive that to just be on unemployment for a little while. If the company doesn't need you, if you're not like an essential worker to the company or whatever, until things start to calm down a little bit. That's what that was for. And you're really complaining about the measly. I think I got a COVID stimulus. What was my COVID stimulus? I think it was like $1,000 or something for a total of like 6 months of not being in work or not working. I mean, I was working from home, but most people weren't working for like 6 months minimum, right? So $1,000. Wow. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And 4.4 trillion of it went into checking or savings, which means it wasn't urgently needed.
That it's complete how much?
0.4 trillion of it went giveaways during COVID, and 4.4 trillion of it went into checking or savings, which
Wow, 4.4 trillion of it went into. Are you trying to tell me that only 600 wait, let me do the numbers on this. So I think this is the right number. So you're trying to tell me 0.012%, is that right? Or is it I'm not sure. It might be 1.2%. Let's just assume it's 1.2. Are you trying to tell me 1.2% of the money, 1.2% went directly into checking or savings? I don't know how you would even know that, but let's just assume that's true. What you're really saying is 98.2 of those dollars, 98.2% of that money had velocity. It went into something required. It paid rent, or it paid the electric bill, or it whatever. Seems like money well spent to me. Are you kidding? Is he complaining about this?
and 4.4 trillion of it went into checking or savings, which means it wasn't urgently needed.
No, I'm sorry. 4.4 trillion out of 5 trillion went into checking or savings. No, that's just complete fabrication. 4.4 trillion of $5 trillion went into checking or savings is what you're telling me? Come on. Does anybody really believe that? Anybody?
People just tucked it away and said, yeah, thanks. We'll take that and tuck it away. And then they pay people more not to work than to work.
Nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. All of this. Like he said earlier, we have to work off of a common set of facts, right? You're not giving factual information right now. You and I are not working off of the same facts. Find factual information and come back to me.
And I mean that literally. When you take all of the bonuses and the credits and
it's just complete bullshit.
Extending unemployment plus the $600 a week bonus on top of unemployment, and the person is able to stay home and not pay what in LA was $7 a gallon for gas at one point, so they don't have to do the commute and have that expense, and they don't have any wardrobe expense and all, and they can just...
Trust me, people suffered during COVID. Believe me. COVID was not a pleasant time for anybody. And if you think it was, then you live in a fantasy land. Nobody enjoyed COVID. It was ugly and horrific and painful, and people lost family. They lost everything and everybody. So I don't want to hear any of this bullshit about how COVID was so great. Everybody loved COVID. You know, COVID is fantastic. Why don't we all go back to COVID? No, nobody wants that. It wasn't fun.
Sit on...
And you know, it's an indication of who this guy really is. Phil McGraw. Who is this guy? He is somebody with so much money that he'll never be able to spend it in a lifetime. He's somebody with so much money that he doesn't need to work another day in his life if he doesn't want to. The only reason he's working right now, if you can even call it that, is because he enjoys it. He likes it. He wants to spread his ridiculous ideas to everybody and their brother.
The couch and not work, and then all that's over and they can't understand why the supply chain is paralyzed.
No, we knew why the supply chain was paralyzed. It was because of a hang up in the Suez Canal.
Well, let's think that through, guys. You pay people not to work, and so you get people not working. Hell, Lassie could figure this one out. You got what you paid for, and we had so many lifelong businesses wiped out by the mismanagement of COVID that it's heartbreaking. I mean, these people.
Like, this is just complete nonsense, all of it. It's garbage, what he's saying right now. How did he get to where he is from where he was? I don't understand. How did we arrive at this position? I'm so lost, it's not even funny.
People that spent generations building these family businesses that worked so hard, and the margin was narrow, and a high percentage of those businesses never recovered. They never came back. You see what happened in.
Well, a lot of those businesses did come back, actually. Joe Biden has created a ton of jobs under his administration. So, yeah, I don't want to hear it.
And one of my problems is we do have a generation that is experiencing a mental, emotional crisis.
Oh, here we go about the generations. Ready?
With the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness since records have been kept. And the agencies that keep those records, the CDC and the Department of Education and others, are the very ones that shut the schools down.
I mean, it was the wisest decision to shut the schools down for a short period of time, yes.
At the school.
And to do it online or remotely. My kid in West Virginia, my kid's school shut down for a short time. And I remember them telling us to drive up, have the parents drive up every day, grab a packet that the kid is supposed to work on every day, and read the packet and finish it and turn it in at the end of the week, all of the packets. That's how we started out in the pandemic, trying to solve the problem. Kids were still learning, wasn't ideal, but it was literally saving lives. In retrospect, maybe we should have ended the packet thing a little sooner and gotten in school, like in-person schooling, sooner than we did. But we didn't know. We were all waiting through this together. We're all figuring it out together, okay? Next pandemic that we have in 100 years or whatever it is, we'll know.
Are the very ones that shut the schools down. They shut the schools down. And as I said early in our conversation, I was fine with that for a couple of weeks, but then it turns into months, and then it turns into a year, and in some cases it turned into 2 years with remote learning that they knew.
Where? Who? Who had 1 year long school shutdowns? Which person? Which district? What school was shut down for 1 year? Can you name them?
Did not work, particularly with low socioeconomic and inner city populations who didn't have good Wi-Fi connections, didn't have parents there to help them along the way. And when they shut the schools down for that long, they did that knowing these kids were in a mental and emotional crisis, and they knew that those schools were a lifeline to those kids, that they needed that for emotional development. They needed it for educational achievement. They needed it so they had social development, and they shut it down anyway. They also knew that the mandated reporters, the teachers, the counselors, the cafeteria workers, and bus drivers and coaches were at the schools, and those were...
Oh my God, dude. This is just fear-mongering bullshit.
Were the ones who had their eyes on these children and could report if they saw signs that the child was being molested or the child was being abused in the home. They shut all of...
Look, this is a short-term, 6-month process that is designed to save tens of millions of people. And guess what? It did. It saved tens of millions of people. And then kids went back to school. This isn't like a permanent thing. Like, we're erasing public school forever. That's not what happened. This guy lives in like a delusion where The government is trying to like control everything and force everybody to never go to school again or something. Get over yourselves. My God. Let me guess. You've seen the Died Suddenly or Plandemic movies too, right?
That down. And when they did, those referrals dropped 40 to 50% in some major markets. And these kids were
In some major markets? In what major markets? Who said that? Where'd you get that information? Don't tell me in some major market. What the hell is a market? Talking about a city? Where did these numbers drop specifically and by how much? This guy is so full of shit, it's ridiculous.
were sent home behind closed doors, locked up with the very abusers. It's not that the abuse went down 40 or 50%. It probably went up because of the frustration of being locked up at home behind those doors. And they shut the schools down without any plan for bringing them back.
That is incorrect, good sir.
And so you ask questions about it, and they say, well, we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. No, you
That's true. And yes, they did. They did their best with what they knew at the time. Absolutely.
did not do the best you could with what you knew at the time. You had information that these children were not as susceptible to this disease as everyone else was. You knew they were in a
Yeah, but you knew that their grandma was way more susceptible to the disease, and they were going to their grandma's house after school every day. That's a completely different situation, and one that he's completely ignoring, too. He's pretending it's not a factor in the equation because he wants to be a right-winger, seemingly. He wants to ignore it. I don't understand how it could be any other way. What other explanation is there when I'm listening to him say this kind of shit?
a mental health crisis. You knew this was their lifeline, and you yanked it out from under them.
As if these kids as if these people gave a shit about kids. Suddenly they care about kids when it's politically advantageous to them. Otherwise, they'll give them the absolute bare minimum that is legally required for lunch. Like the bare minimum, like, nutritional value that is legally required. They'll give them Lunchables for lunch. Like, this is insane. These people don't care about kids. They care about propagandizing.
And you damn well knew what you were doing when you did it.
So lurking behind that, your principles 7 and 8, I've got about 3 more questions I hope we can address. And so we'll start with this one, I think. I've been thinking a lot about what might constitute a meritocracy from a technical perspective. And so, well, the first thing we might point out is that hopefully we could all agree that there are some things that are worth doing in comparison to other things. And if we can't agree on that, we can't ever get anything done. So some things are worth doing in comparison to others. Doing the things that should be done efficiently and effectively means that we can do more of them, or we can do the good thing faster. And so that seems to be good. And then a meritocracy it's essentially reward for those things. It's reward for those things and punishment for failure to do it, right? So once you decide that something is to be done, you valued it, then you value those actions and patterns of attention that will lead to that outcome. And that's a meritocracy.
I feel like I just waded through molasses to understand what the fuck he's talking about, but sure, okay. Maybe I'm too fucking stupid to understand what he's trying to communicate, but okay, go on.
Right, and so then you could add another level of definition there that ties in with what we've been describing, is that if the proper self is something like long-term harmony established voluntarily with others, then a proper meritocracy is a system that rewards behaviors that are aimed at that and punishes those that aren't, right? And that's also what you would be called upon to speak about, for example, when you're not staying silent just so others can remain comfortable. So
when you're not remaining silent just so others can stay comfortable. Okay. I don't know of a single person who does that, but whatever.
A technical issue with regards to meritocracy here now.
Like, here's the thing. The only time that applies or makes any sense whatsoever, staying silent so others can remain comfortable, is when basically you're not calling people the N-word. That's pretty much the extent of it. You're remaining silent so others can be comfortable. Well, they're not comfortable hearing the N-word, so I have to stay silent? Yes.
Now, I want to, so you can tell me what you think about that, but then I want to tie that into something you mentioned much earlier too, which is the tyranny of the fringe, right? So I think there's always a fringe, right? And I think the fringe generally tends to be people who are pursuing power and people who are pursuing short-term hedonistic self-gratification.
He keeps saying hedonistic self-gratification. I don't know what he means by that. Does he mean atheist? People who just do whatever because they like doing it? I mean, I am a non-believer, and that's not how I act, so I'm not sure, like, what stereotype he has built up in his head about people like this.
And the fringe is much noisier and much louder and much more dominant than it's been, certainly that I can ever remember.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And I'm wondering, Dr. Phil, do you think maybe I've been wrestling with this idea. You know, we're all connected together now, and there's no reason to assume that what's pathological can't spread with equal rapidity compared to what's valuable. Right. So now we're all hooked together. We could say, well, good ideas spread faster, but we could say, well, yeah, bad ideas, bad contagious ideas also spread faster. Now, part of what stops bad contagious ideas from spreading in real life is that you can identify the people who are spreading them and you can stop them. It's because you see them face to face and maybe you, in principle, continually interact with them. Right? So they can be held responsible. So here's a hypothesis. It's a deep hypothesis. You tell me what you think about it.
Okay, well, when he says hypothesis, he, by definition, means I have no evidence to back this up. But okay, what's your hypothesis?
Virtualization enables psychopathy. And the reason it does is because it decouples action from consequences.
So he's saying people being online enables people to be psychopaths because it decouples what?
And the reason it does is because it decouples action from consequences.
Okay, I suppose so. Think 4chan and anybody on the 4chan side, you know, far right nutcases who are literally celebrating Hitler's birthday every year and stuff and reading Mein Kampf and all that junk. Yeah. Okay, I can see that for them, I suppose. Of course, he's talking about trans people.
I mean, it's almost like a definition of virtualization, right? I mean, if I'm an anonymous sadistic troll, I can say whatever the hell I want to anyone.
Again, I say, I don't know what part we're in now, but I'm going to say it again. I don't ever want to be this close to Jordan Peterson's face for the rest of my life, and I will do anything to prevent that from happening.
Sadistic troll. I can say whatever the hell I want to anyone whenever I want. And not only do I not have consequences, I may get attention for it, right? So the incentive structure. So imagine this, and I'm asking you your opinion as a psychologist. So 2 questions. Do you think virtualization might enable psychopathy? And if it
So do you think that using a cell phone might make you a psychopath?
does, then what do you think of the danger that poses?
Well,
No, I don't think it does at all. I don't think using a cell phone creates psychopaths. I think that using the internet, let me rephrase. I think that the internet, it kind of enables psychopaths to gather together. Do you guys have any idea how much internet I use? This chair that I sit in here, this is a 24/7 thing. I think I've sat on my couch back there a total of 3 times in my entire life. I sit in this chair 24/7 and I do something. I play StarCraft 2 when I want to relax, or I play Breath of the Wild 2, or I play Pokemon, I listen to Nutter Butters, I listen to podcasts and all this, audiobooks and everything, or I write, do a lot of writing, script writing, or book writing or whatever. I'm an author now, I guess. So anyway, that's what I do when I'm here. 24/7. I am always at a screen. Hasn't turned me into a psychopath at all, like in any way. I'm not a psychopath. So Phil's going to tell us if psychopaths are created by screens. They're not. Just a joke, man. And we told me what you think about Jordan Peterson in the comments. He's shameless. He is a shameless liar, a scam artist, as far as I can tell. Like, give me a break.